Welcome to the late Alfred Hitchcock Presents. This is the late Alfred Hitchcock, and I'm the presenter, offering you a story they wouldn't let me do on TV, the spoil sports. However, Radio 7 has no such scruples, presumably on the somewhat misguided assumption that out of sight is out of mind. How foolish. Am living proof of the power of the imagination. For years I have imagined myself to be a gentle... And speaking of blades, our tale today is a sharp little item about the murderous power of the mind. The Waxwork by A.M. Burridge. While the uniformed attendants of Marriner's Waxworks were ushering the last stragglers through the doors, the manager sat in his office, interviewing Raymond Houston. Well, there's nothing new in your request. In fact, we refused it to different people about £100 for sleeping alone in the Chamber of Horrors. I hope you don't think that we have made any such offer. Oh. Very well, Mr. Houston. Get your story printed in the Morning Echo. There'll be a £5 note waiting for you here. Ghosts? It's just that I couldn't sit alone among them all night, with their seeming to stare at me in the way they do. I warn you, you're in for a very uncomfortable night. Houston had known that from the moment when the idea had first occurred to him. His soul sickened at the prospect. But he had a wife and family to keep. I don't think your waxworks will worry me much. You're not superstitious. Not a bit. But you're a journalist. You must have a strong imagination. The news editors for whom I've worked have always complained I haven't any. Right. I think the last of the people have gone. I'll take you down and show you around. I must ask you not to smoke. We had a fire scare down in the murderer's den this evening. I don't know who gave the alarm, but the manager stopped once and spoke to a man in uniform, saying something about an armchair in the murderer's den. He led the way through an open barrier and down ill-lit stone stairs, which conveyed a sinister impression of giving access to a dungeon. Ape the gentleman. Within 5 yards of him sat Mrs. Thompson, that erotic romanticist, hanged to propitiate the British middle-class matronhood. That's Crippen. I expect you'll recognize him. Insignificant little beast who looks as if he couldn't... I was coming to him. This is our star turn. He's the only one of the bunch that hasn't been hanged. The figure was that of a small, slight man, not much more than 5 feet in height. It wore little waxed moustaches, large spectacles, and a caped coat. There was something so exaggeratedly French in its appearance that it reminded Houston of a stage caricature. He could not have said precisely why the mild-looking face seemed to him so repellent. Dr. Bourdette was the terror of Paris. He carried on his work of healing by day and of throat-cutting by night. He killed for the sheer devilish pleasure it gave him to kill, and always in the same way, with a razor. After his last crime, he disappeared. There's no doubt he managed to make away with himself. What eyes he's got! You find the eyes bite into you. Well, that's excellent realism, then, for Bourdette was supposed to mesmerize his victims with gangway, and deliberately turned it so that its back was towards the effigy of Dr. Bourdette. He faced the sinister figures boldly enough. They were only waxworks. So long as he let that thought dominate all others, he promised himself that all would be well. It did not, however, save him long from the discomfort occasioned by the waxen stairman's effigy, haunted and tormented him, and he itched with the desire to turn and look. He's only a waxwork like the rest of you. You're all only waxworks. They were only waxworks. Yes. But waxworks don't move him. There had been the least subtle change in the grouping of the figures in front. Crippen, for instance, seemed to have turned at least 1 degree to the left. Cowardly and very absurd. They were only waxworks. Then why all that silent unrest about him? He swung round quickly to encounter the mild but baleful stare of Dr. Bourdette. Or was it his own breath which sounded to him as if it came from a distance? He sat rigid, listening and straining, until he exhaled with a long sigh. His own breath, after all. Or, what was that funny story which somebody had told him in the full staff yesterday? He recalled part of it, but not all, for... You moved, damn you. I saw you. Then he sat quite still, staring straight before. He stepped off his pedestal with the mincing care of a lady alighting from a bus. Good evening. You cannot move or speak without my bidding, but you can hear me perfectly well. Something tells me... Pardon me, but I am a little stiff. And let me explain. I was close to this building this evening when I saw a policeman regarding me a thought too curiously. I mingled with the... And when all the fools had rushed to the stairs, I stripped my effigy of the caped coat, donned it, and took its place. Unfortunately, I was not always being watched and had opportunities to ease the rigidity of my pose. The manager's description of me, which I had the embarrassment of being compelled to overhear, was biased, but not altogether inaccurate. Clearly, I am not dead, although it is as well that the world thinks otherwise. Divided between collectors and non-collectors. With the non-collectors, we are not concerned. Off to matchboxes. I collect throats. He paused again and regarded Houston's throat with interest mingled with disfavor. But you have a skinny neck, sir, if you will overlook a personal remark. I should never have selected you from choice. I like men with thick necks. Thick, red necks. This is a little French razor. The blade, you will observe, is very narrow. They do not cut very deep, but deep enough. In just one little moment, you shall see for yourself. I shall ask you... Merci. The waxwork figures dead. His previous employers were wrong in having him credited with no imagination, capable of motion. But then, after all, he was only a waxwork. Well, as with food and fashion, the French do seem to be at the cutting edge of murder. Until our next tale, pleasant dreams and vive la guillotine. Incidentally, no blade was blunted during the making of this program. Goodbye, and pleasant dreams. The late Alfred. It is produced by Frank Sterling at Unique for Radio 7.